So your listening skills are better than your speaking skills. Why does that happen? And what are some of the ways that you can actually finally start to develop your speaking skills so that if your listening skills are already high, but your speaking skills are low, how can we actually raise that level so that we can bridge this gap? So it's typically so much more common for people to actually have higher listening skills than their speaking skills. It's really interesting because actually for me as a Spanish learner, my speaking skills are actually better than my listening skills. And this is because from day one, I started practicing my speaking ability because I knew it was really, really important that I could actually start to use my mouth and produce the words and sentences in that language from day one. However, for most people, you all started during school and you started to learn these words and these sentences using textbooks and this classic way, so after 10 years of learning this language, you have a great level of vocabulary. Typically, you can listen to a lot, you can understand so much, but what typically is the limiter, is the factor that is stopping you in your tracks, is actually being able to produce the language. So in this video today, guys, I'm going to share with you some ways that you can actually start to bridge the gap between your speaking and your listening skills and to help you understand why this actually happens. So first of all, the reason is because when you are listening, your mind has to simply do two things. And it's not always simple actually, because I find it actually very hard to develop my listening skills, especially to the level where you are catching every single word that a native speaker is saying. That to me is the highest level of listening skills that you can achieve. For a lot of people, maybe they'll say, oh, my level is maybe I can understand 80 to 90% of what a native speaker can say. That's very good level and a very good standard. But typically you want to still really chip away to try to increase your level a little bit more. So when we're listening in the language, typically your brain is doing a couple of different things. So one is noticing grammar patterns, two is noticing sound, and three is actually processing what those words are, what sense does it make when they're connected together. So a lot of that understanding is also contextual because there are so many different contexts. I'm sure you may have experienced this before where you're in a situation and you just have no idea about the topic, you're not familiar with it, you haven't listened or engaged in that topic before in the language, and then you're listening, you're like, oh my god, I have no idea what these people are saying. And it's because you're not familiar with it. And then if you were to have to speak in that situation and engage in the conversation, then it just becomes so much harder. So when we are listening, we are just absorbing the language, right? But when we are speaking, we have to think about the grammar pattern. We have to think about the contextual cue, but then we actually have to produce this language, right? So we need to, within like 1 second, like so instantly, you have to start actually putting this sentence together. You need to make sure the pronunciation is correct and your mind needs to actually get it out of your mouth within this really short period of time. So when you do develop a high level of language, it typically means you have a great level of automaticity and spontaneity in the way that you can speak. So for me, that's what really fluency really is automaticity and spontaneity in the way that you produce the language. So you already have so much volume and so much frequency in the amount of times that you've seen this language, you've been exposed to this language, that your mind can process this information so rapidly, so quickly, that you actually can engage in these conversations so quick. Boom, 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 boom. And when you're learning the language, especially when you're at an intermediate level or a lower level, you're going through this grinding process where the process is slow. You're trying to find a way to transition between, like a low level of listening to a higher level, or even when you're at a high level of listening to an even higher level. So there's so many different circumstances where maybe you feel comfortable in one, but then in another you may feel a little less comfortable. So the reason why listening is typically easier than developing your speaking level is because it's easier to practice. You can do it by yourself. You can do it listening to videos. You can do active listening. You can listen to all types of content just on YouTube or whatever platform you prefer. However, with speaking, it becomes so much trickier. It's so much trickier to really develop your speaking ability because you need to produce this language, and most people really hate speaking with themselves. It's not natural. You need that other person to really help your mind engage and to have that conversation. So that's why, of course, I would recommend speaking with a teacher. I would recommend doing voice memos. I find this useful. So it's recording to your phone, and then optionally you can play it back if you want, so to also practice your listening. Of course, shadowing is also a great way. So just to really develop the muscles in your cheeks and in your mouth for you to be able to start producing this language at a high level. So you got to go step by step, you know, meet yourself where you're at. Like, yeah, I think it's good to expose yourself to harder content, but if you can understand only 10 to 20% of the content, of course, it's way too hard for you. So you want to really start transitioning, and you can use native level content for many different things, definitely for mimicking, definitely for active listening. So even if you watch like 5 minutes of the video but it takes you 30 minutes because every time you come across a word you have to pause and stop and go back, like that is still an important exercise for you to do, because you're really training your ear to try to catch every single word. Whereas if you don't do that, typically your mind will glaze over. I'm sure you've had this this scenario before, where maybe you're listening to a podcast in English and then your mind just glazes over the sound. You're like, I couldn't even tell you what I just listened to for the last 20 minutes. So that's why I would actually really recommend active video participation. So active video participation is when you pause the video maybe every 1 to 2 minutes, and then you have to say, what did they just talk about? What was the question? What was the topic? So you are kind of like summarizing what they are saying as the conversation goes on, but this way you are involved, you are included. So this is what we're trying to do, and that's why the participation aspect is so important. So that's why speaking is so hard. And as you already know, it's really hard to find a way to get exposed to this level of the language naturally, and to find an environment where you can speak the language all the time, or at least for 1 hour a day. The reason for that is because, yeah, maybe you're in your home country, you're not living in the other country where you can get that exposure to the language. So that's, yeah, that typically is quite hard. So if you can go to a country which speaks your target language, then of course that's ideal. But a lot of us don't have that luxury. So we have to think about how can we create that in our own environments. So yeah, speaking with people, speaking with teachers, speaking with online teachers, of course, that's a really, really great way to do that. If you are interested in developing your English skill, you can head to VALLHO.com. That's VALLHO. So VALLHO is an English teaching platform that really helps you to develop and reach that really high native level of a language, so you can finally start to just relax and connect with that language at a really, really good level, and you can really start to you can really begin to start feeling engaged and connected with that language. So for a lot of you, you know, the goal is for work. You know, you really want to achieve a high level of listening and a very high level of speaking for your work life, and then of course for your social life too. But typically you want to have that confidence. If someone asks you to go for a coffee to chat about a project or to chat about something, you can handle that. If you need to go on the video call and speak with your colleagues from Europe or from Asia or from South America, wherever they are from, you can feel comfortable to do that. And typically it requires that really that level that I was mentioning before about having high automaticity and high spontaneity in the language. Those are the goals that we really want to strive towards when we are speaking in the language. Another aspect that I want to mention for the last part of this video is about certainty. Okay, so when you have a high level of listening and you have a high level of speaking, typically you have a high certainty level of what has been said if you're listening to a video, or what someone is speaking about when you are speaking. Okay, so when you are speaking and you are listening so fast and in real time, and then you are speaking so quickly and automatically. So when we have a high certainty level, so let's say you have 100% certainty, 60% certainty, 30% certainty. If you are listening to something, you're only 30% certain about what they said, then that's really hard for you to then engage and, to be able to speak with native people because you're always doubting yourself, you're always hesitating. So typically that means you need to increase your listening skills. That means more volume, more exposure, spending more time really using active listening and developing your ability to listen. And then in terms of speaking, if you are only have say 80% certainty in what you say, then again you can have a little bit of a delay, you can have a bit of hesitation in what you say. If you have 50% certainty, it's going to be much harder. If you have only 20 to 30% certainty, maybe typically you're a beginner towards intermediate level. So beginner to intermediate, of course lower, intermediate to advanced, advanced higher, and then more that advanced level, you're getting into that 80% certainty boundary, and then you're kind of tweaking and fine-tuning to get that really high level of certainty, so you have automaticity and spontaneity. Okay, so I really hope that you enjoyed this video today, guys. So this was about those of you that have good listening skills and you really are trying to increase your speaking skills and understand why that's happening. Those were the reasons that I discussed already. And then I think when you really want to take that next step forward, you really just need to think about, okay, where are the gaps? Like, where are the gaps in my language? How can I fill those gaps? And that is by really assessing your listening, assessing your speaking skills, and thinking about which one is holding you back, and then really taking the steps forward to help you do that. Some people really don't know what those steps look like, and they don't have a program, they don't have a clear structure, a clear way to know that they can start learning in an effective way. So as I mentioned, if you are looking to seriously develop your English level to a very high native standard, then I would head to VALLHO.com, that's VALLHO, to really help you to develop and to finally start to feel connected with the language. Hope you enjoyed the video today, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.